My name is Larrym Maupinom. I'm from America. I've had a rather diverse life. Grew up in Idaho in the United States. Went to college at University of Idaho. Got a commission in the military from there. Traveled in the military, a lot of parts of the world, a lot of parts of the United States. My growing up years, I did mostly farm work, farm labor. I used to have a little business when I was growing up, put myself through college with a hay and straw stacking little business. That's how I put myself through college. And then from there, of course, I was in the military for 24 years. One combat tour in Vietnam in 1969, 1970. Following that, I went to work for, when I retired from the military in 1991, I went to work for an engineering company in Alabama. I worked there for 6 years. And then following that, I started doing disaster work with FEMA, which I did for about 15 years. Worked disasters all over the United States, hurricanes, fires, floods, tornadoes, that kind of thing, and did that until about 4 years ago, and then I retired, and from there, just been enjoying life.
How old are you now?
Pardon me?
How old are you now?
I'm 80.
So why did you decide to join an army?
You know, that's a good question. I came from a pretty strong military background family. My brother was in the military. My dad was in the military in World War II. My wife's father was an Air Force pilot in World War II. The Maupins go back in American history to the American Revolution. We've had people in the military almost from the beginning of this country.
Mm-hmm. And so, did your perspective on life change once you joined an army?
Oh, I guess I didn't answer your question exactly why I did that. We were at war at that time. It was in, like I say, I went in the military in 1967 out of college. And, you know, I just thought, well, somebody's got to go. And, you know, coming from a strong military background and stuff, I thought, well, why not me? So I went through the Army ROTC program, got commissioned, and spent the next 24 years in the military.
Great. So do you think it is important to take a responsibility for, or what does the responsibility means to you, or really for the situation, and then you say, I'm going to do it?
Well, if I understand your question, people have to be responsible and take responsibility with whatever it is they're doing or wherever they are. If you don't take responsibility, what's the alternative? You know, the alternative, you don't do anything. And then what gets done? Nothing. And so I guess that has something to do too with commitment. Again, you can't take responsibility and do it the way you should if you don't have a commitment to what it is that you're doing. So they kind of go together. So, you know, it's going back to my comment on joining the military. I felt it was a responsibility. When your country calls, I believe you should go. You know, answer the call. Others don't. But that goes into, I believe, into the thing maybe about freedom. You know, freedom isn't free. You hear that all the time. You know, freedom's not free. Well, it isn't. In fact, I think it's probably the most important subject I think we could talk about today maybe is freedom. Again, it goes back. Without freedom, what do you have? Well, you have tyranny. You have oppression. When you guys, you know, we're talking here, I grew up in probably the freest country the world's ever known. To me, freedom is, you know, it's again, you've got to fight for freedom, and freedom gives you what I've always had. You can say what you want, you can do what you want, you can go where you want, you can meet your potential. and it's freedom of speech and freedom of religion and those kinds of things. And so if you don't have that, then you will never, ever have life fulfillment, I don't believe. I've had the opportunity in my life to go behind the Iron Curtain in a communist country, look to these people in the eye. It's like almost, there's not a light. There's no, and many of the people, not all of them, but they're kind of like dead when you look at them in some cases. And I talked to a doctor in East Berlin. He said he made $300 over the normal wage being a doctor in a communist country. What's the incentive? Why would somebody want to be a doctor and make the same amount of money as a clerk? Yeah. And my wife and I, one of the things that we did see is you would go into a store, for example, and the waiters or waiter, whoever was in that store, had no motive to wait on you. They got the same amount of money, whether they waited on you or they didn't. There was no self-satisfaction, I don't think, to what they were doing. The shelves were pretty much empty. I think the productivity goes down the same way. If you're forced to do something, you're not as willing to do it, or that sort of thing. And so in America, if you want to say something, you can say it. Now, that's changing tragically, I think. Once you lose freedom, it's so hard to get it back. It's just easier to keep it. And so, is it worth fighting for? Yeah, it is. Does that mean there aren't limits? Of course there are. Once my freedom encroaches on your freedom, then there's a limit there. But I think those are the limits that should have. We both might have a different vision of freedom, but it's kind of like live and let live. I'm not going to do something to infringe on your freedom, but likewise, I don't want you to do something to infringe on mine. And I think that's about the limit of how freedom should be controlled.
How are American people getting, or how are losing the freedom? In what way?
One of the things with freedom, I think you have to have a free press, for example. The press is supposed to be looking at politicians or whatever, and when they see something wrong, they're supposed to fairly and honestly report it to the public at large, so something can be done before it's too late. I don't think we have that kind of a free press in America. And my view is most of the press in America is very one-sided. So the American people at large are not getting the whole picture. If you only get one side of the coin, are you free? I would say not. So you need to get both sides of the coin. And so so the press is important, and again, it goes back to, you've got to take personal responsibility for, in your area, should somebody else be trying to keep, no, you got to do your part, that sort of thing. So.
Do you think the freedom of speech go hand in hand with the freedom of thought?
Absolutely, because if you have propaganda, then your mind doesn't have factual things to actually have the freedom of thought, where you have a worldview, for example. If I am constantly talking about a subject and you hear it over and over and over again, I can change your thought process. The Germans in World War II, Goebbels, who was the minister of propaganda, said if you say something to someone, long enough, often enough, soon enough, eventually they'll believe that. So I think that actually has an impact on your freedom of speech, because you don't really have freedom of thought, which is where speech comes from.
censorship. I wanted to say like there is censorship of one side.
Right. Well, it is censorship in a sense because it's already been proven now that the government has been in concert with, for example, Facebook, telling Facebook there are things that they shouldn't be talking about. That's not the government's business to tell a private business, what it is they should be talking about. And that's part of what Elon Musk did when he bought Twitter. He went in and proved that there was coercion between the government and Twitter on what could and couldn't be said. Those are avenues of information, to so many people. And so if you have the information being suppressed or not saying something, sometimes it's just as bad as lying about it. It's a type of misinformation. And a lot of that's going on in the United States, I hate to say. And, the politicians, and I think politicians in general aren't the most honest people. I mean, they tend to stretch stuff. I understand that. For me, I'd like them just to be honest about everything, because so many times they'll say one thing, and then when they get elected, they do something else. And so the integrity isn't there. And I think we're also losing integrity in the military. And I think I can speak of that. I spent some time, myself in the military, but it's being changed from a organization that provides the security and protection of the people at large to it's almost become a social experiment. That's not the function of a military. I sometimes hate to put it like this, but a military primarily is to break things and kill people that are trying to do the same thing to you. And while that may seem harsh, that's part of the price that people pay. If someone's trying to take my freedom away, I'm not going to sit around and let them. I oftentimes I think I'm not going to be around a lot longer, but my kids, my grandkids, they will be. So if I can do something now, I'm going to do it. And so, I've already proven I'm willing. I'm just not as able as I used to be, but, it's... So if that kind of addresses that.
What do you think is different compared when you were young and compared to young people?
With one?
What is the difference between when you were young and compared to people?
Well, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about it. Exactly, I've thought about it some. When I was growing up, I never ever thought about there was a problem with diversity. It wasn't a big thing that people, now they're trying to divide everybody. That wasn't the case when I grew up. And people, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, they were Americans. I can tell you with absolute certainty that today there's many, many people that hate America. Why? I don't know. I'll buy them a plane ticket to China if they want, but that wasn't the case. It's just, we liked everybody, blacks, Indians, it didn't matter. We weren't taught, at least from my youth, we weren't taught about people are bad or good, they're just people. And so honesty, kids were taught honesty and integrity and responsibility. I don't see that everywhere today. And I grew up in an area where if you got something, you earned it. The free lunch thing, to me, doesn't work. There aren't free lunches. People think they are, but they aren't. We're seeing too many free lunches offered in America today, and in other places too. I think, you're seeing Marxism, Leninism, materialism, liberalism spreading throughout the world. And somebody's got to say enough's enough before it's too late. For example, the Jews in Germany, they didn't see it coming, and they're it was too late once they figured out. And so I believe in big push is for whatever reason they want to disarm Americans. Well, that's a path of oppression for everybody. If you take the arms away from the people, and then you take the free speech, it started, I think, with political correctness. That's a type of assault on free speech. You don't like what I say, I can't say it. When I grew up as a kid, if you didn't like what I said, I didn't care. And, vice versa. So it was just it was a free environment. We were taught value, responsibility, fight for, what you think's right, those kinds of things. And we're losing that some, I think, in humanity. And I hope I'm wrong about a lot of things, but I'm just telling you like I see it now. I think we're headed down a bad way. And, it's I don't know what, everybody's talking about World War III. I don't think so many people today they don't know what that's like. On TV you watch Ukraine and then you say, ho-hum, well, let's go get a McDonald's hamburger. And today I think people are getting callous because you bring war right into your front room. When I was young, all you got on, you didn't have televisions, first of all, in my family. They were around, but we didn't have a TV till I was 13. And so, we learned to take care of ourselves, and, people trusted each other. Your folks would say, hey, be home by dark. You go out in the morning, eat breakfast, they'd say, well, be home. If you want lunch, it's at 12, be home by dark, whatever. And that we kind of took care of ourselves. And people today many people want others to take care of them. We'll pay for your college, we'll pay for your food, we'll take care of your kids, and they will, if you let them. But then you've lost humanity, I think. But
what's the potential of a society when you lose the freedom of speech? What can happen to society when you take out that freedom of speech?
Well, anything. Once you don't have freedom of speech, then you can be imprisoned for saying anything. And so then it's total propaganda. The schools, if a school teacher says something that isn't according to whoever the authorities are, they'll put them in jail, they'll send them to re-education camps, they'll do whatever. So it becomes forced compliance. If you lose freedom of speech, that's a big one. It's and then if you lose freedom of speech, you're going to lose freedom of religion right along with it. You're going to lose freedom to address your government for saying things, because they're going to become speech police. And I saw that in the Karl Marx plots in East Germany, where you're in West Germany and there is freedom and people are talking and doing whatever. And then we went over there and you'd see people on the corner and they're whispering and not wanting anybody to hear what they say, because they could be sent to prison for anything they say. So losing freedom of speech, you've lost so much. And the freedom to address the government, assembly. We have freedom to assemble, although that's changing some because of you probably heard about the January 6th thing. There was a bunch of people that went to, protest the election. And that's supposed to be part of the First Amendment of our Constitution. They're still being hunted down and arrested just for being there. And that's part of the First Amendment. So we're losing that freedom. And so that's, again, freedom of speech in a sense that they're going around. And if they were there expressing something, not in verbally necessarily, but in intent. We don't like what's going on. And so now, okay, we're going to arrest you and put you in jail. And that'll happen with freedom of speech if you lose it.
Do you think how the Constitution was written and what's in the Constitution is the reason why America got to a level to be such a great country?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're losing that. One of the things was everybody's equal under the law. I grew up hearing that and believing that. Not true today. We're losing that. It depends on where you are in the hierarchy. If you're a certain political persuasion, you're here. If you're another political persuasion, you're here. And maybe a third one, you're down here. And so, that's wasn't supposed to be that way.
Can you elaborate more on equality according to the model of constitution and equality that are trying to pursue the socialism countries? Like the constitution said a kind of like what the equality is, right?
Well, our constitution initially was minimum control by the government, maximum freedom of the individuals, and that the states were the ones that had the power, with the people and that sort of thing, not the federal government. Of course, it's grown. It's the idea, I don't know if you've heard the name Patrick Henry. He was a famous politician, a famous orator before the country was actually founded. He was, when they were having the debates on whether to go to war with Great Britain, he was from Virginia, very fiery guy. And he was at a convention. He said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And so that was, at the time, it was a very fiery comment. And he was trying to convince the American, the colonists that were wanting to have independence to, take up arms and fight for their freedom, as opposed to let King George of England, send troops over and put soldiers in the houses without their consent and all that sort of thing, and taxation. So it started in that idea that if something wasn't written in the Constitution, then the government couldn't do anything about it. It was the state's responsibility. And and then they said, well, that still doesn't address the individual freedoms and stuff. So that's when they expanded to what's called the Bill of Rights. And that was about the rights of individual people in our country. And so they had things like freedom of speech and the things we've been talking about, freedom to vote and those sorts of things. So it started that way, and then it's evolving into something that the original constitutionalists didn't really intend. And that today, in our Constitution, we have the Supreme Court. You have 3 branches of government, theoretically, that are co-equal, but they're really not anymore. The judicial branch are the 11 Supreme Court judges, and half of them vote on ideological things and about it. It depends on, sometimes there's more conservatives and sometimes there's more liberals. And today it just so happens there's 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. The conservatives pretty much look at what the Constitution says. The liberals, on the other hand, they look at ideology. They don't care. They think the Constitution should change with time, where the others say, no, the Constitution is a bedrock of our country. It doesn't change, and we will interpret laws in accordance with the way the Constitution is written. And that's a big dividing mark in our country. A lot of people think that the Constitution was written a bunch of old guys like me, that didn't really understand the future and that it should evolve with time. And so that gets to cut into, if you believe that, then the Constitution isn't the rock of our country, and then the laws don't apply. They can do whatever they want with the laws, which they're kind of doing in some cases.
So do you believe the moral laws are objective? They are not changing?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
They're objective, correct?
Yeah, well, you said you got freedom of speech. Sorry. We're having political correctness, and we're going to make you woke, and you can't say this, you can't say that, and other things. So, yeah.
What's the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity?
Outcome
and opportunity. Equality.
Oh, opportunity.
And equality of opportunity.
Well, now that's a really good question too. and let me throw another term in, equity. Right now, I grew up, it was equal opportunity. I had just as much opportunity to fail as I did to succeed. And if I failed, whose fault is it? Not yours, mine. And going back, and I accept that as responsibility. I failed, okay, next. I learned something, I'm coming back stronger. Today, the big push, and again, it's this woke concept of being woke, is it's equal outcome. You know, you may have the same opportunity, but that's not important. What's important is if I make $100, you get $100 too, because it's equal outcome. You know, if you worked hard to go to college, somebody else can go to college too, because that's the deal. You get equal outcome. That'll destroy this country, this world, in my experience and my judgment. But anyway, so, you know, we hear equal opportunity and people get confused with equal outcome. And they're totally different. And the only way it should be equal outcome is if you start with equal opportunity and two people, through their own personal efforts, come out with the same result, not because the government says it's going to be equal. And it's almost like youth sports. And I'm not going to say too much about this because I could really get on my soapbox. But it worked out when I was young, again, going back to that, in America, if you didn't make a team or whatever, too bad, you know, find something else to do or quit crying about it and you know, get over it. And so today, equal outcome. You don't have winners, you don't have losers in, you know, youth sports. Everybody gets a ribbon, a participation ribbon. And that has really taken away, I think, value for, you know, effort and performance. And if you're not good at something, too bad. Go find something you are. Everybody's good at something. You know, for you, it might be music. You know, for you, it might be archery. You know, maybe I'm a pretty good swimmer, but we shouldn't all get forced to, if I want to be a swimmer, for example, and just because I'm not good, I shouldn't get my ribbon and that sort of thing. So did that answer?
Yeah, it was great. It was actually great answer. And so I wanted to go to your experience. So basically, you grew up in the conditions that you wanted to join the college, but you had to start working to be able to pay for the college, correct?
Yes. Well, my personal experience, and of course I only speak to mine, yeah. Exactly. My older sister was real sick. And when my father got home from the military, he found out that he was going to stay in the military, actually, and he got home after World War II, and he found out my sister had gotten quite sick, and so he had to get out of the military. And so I didn't ever think about it growing up, but my folks never had a lot of money, but we had a good life. So when I wanted to go to college, they had no money to send me. So that's when I started working in the hayfields when I was 13. Worked all day. And so I knew how to do it. So when I guess I was about a senior in high school, I went out and I found a company that had an old truck, and I went to the bank and borrowed some money and I bought it. And I did pretty well that first year, and then next year I did a little better and bought another truck, and then did a little better and bought another truck. And so I was able to put myself totally through college. And while I was there, I was in a fraternity, and I've always been pretty handy. So I became the house manager, which meant I took care of anything, broken windows or whatever needed to be done. And so I got my food free. And then I got in the ROTC program, Reserve Officer Training Corps. And then my junior and senior year, that paid some money every month. So I was able to use that. And then then I got another job at the university working in a sorority, which wasn't terrible bad news for a young guy, you know. And so I worked and we prepared the food and that sort of thing for the girl. Well, the cook prepared the food, but we would put it on plates and whatever and take it out and put it on their tables and stuff like that. So that helped also. And then I got to become the head person, so I got another extra little bit of money. Back in then, it was like $15 a month extra, but that was huge in that point in time. And so with all of those, I was able to put myself through college, and actually I didn't scrape. I with my trucking business and with getting my board and room paid for, and with a little bit from ROTC, I didn't suffer, but I did pay myself through 4 years of college, actually 5 years of college.
Great. What would you tell to young men today that are missing any meaning or purpose? Yeah.
The purpose.
Young guys.
Purpose. Isn't that an age-old question? I think men have been searching for what's your purpose in life since day one, and that's a really good question. It's a kind of a deep question. People say, "Why am I here?" And I guess the line of demarcation may be a spiritual concept or not. If you are spiritual, and I happen to be, then you think about it one way, and I believe it's to serve God, and and He a lot of times can guide us in the way we want to go. If you're secular, then I don't know how to answer that because I'm not, and I don't know. I don't think, maybe so, but it seems to me that in my experience, people that have some spirituality or whatever their religion may be, they tend to be happier, and they tend to be able to have more joy in life. And I've just my personal experience, I've seen that so many times. Oftentimes people that are really depressed, or they're not happy, or they've got marriage problems, not that it can't be both sides, but to me the preponderance is the people that have a spirituality do better in life, and they search for a purpose. It by doing good things, people by just being good people and that sort of thing, and having a higher authority. If you don't have a higher authority, then where do your moralities and where do your lines come from? If I don't have a higher authority, then I can say, well, I think stealing is fine. Why isn't it? You say it isn't, I say it is. Why are you right and I'm wrong, or vice versa? So there's no bound on, what's right and what's wrong. Because then it gets down to you say it's right, I say it's right. Who's right? Well, I am because I'm bigger, or that sort of thing. And so.
That's great. What do you think about suffering? Because
suffering? Well, I don't think anybody should suffer, but unfortunately, they do. And I think that if somebody can help alleviate suffering, they should. I mean, I think that's a human trait, and at least again, going back with, I wouldn't say in all cases. There's a lot of secular people that don't want suffering either, but I think you can't have good without bad. You can't have good. If you have evil, you're going to have good. Vice versa. A lot of people think there is an evil in the world. Well, there is, and it's evil versus good and that sort of thing. And so I don't, and I don't know. I think everybody on a personal basis should do what they can to relieve, suffering or whatever. But, let's be realistic. It's just impossible, because what's suffering? One thing for you, one thing for me. Is it loss of life in your family? Is it a suffering because you've been arrested and you put in chains in a prison? You know, have you got somebody that's sick? So suffering takes many, many forms, and we will never eliminate suffering, but we should strive to do the best we can.
And I think, like you said before, that you would do whatever to keep the freedom of your kids and your grandkids. And one way to do it is you speaking out like this.
Well, you can take that to the bank that I'll do whatever it takes. And your parents would too. You know, and you guys would. And I'm sure you would. You know, it's, my life isn't even close to being as important as my family, and, you know, and, you know, I'm not afraid to lose my life for a good cause. And a good cause is, you know, protect my family or whatever. Would I die in a millisecond if I had to? Yeah. If it meant, you know, protecting my family or something, that wouldn't even concern me. And but I think on a larger scale too, I think, like in our country, if the country calls, and you've got a legitimate country, you know, like Russia invading Ukraine, that's immoral. You know, I would be the most happy person in the world if somebody could stop Putin and you know, turn that around. But unfortunately, that's the case in our country. Unless in the military, you don't have to do something if you think, and you know it's against the law. But if you've got a legitimate country, like America or you know, Slovakia or whatever, and then the country needs you, then go. You know, it's like, if not me, who? If not now, when? You know, that's an old saying you hear in America all the time. I don't know if you guys use it. But, you know, it's the same thing. Somebody's got to step up. And you say, well, who's that somebody? Well, run and get yourself a mirror, and you'll know right away who it is.
You have to bring some sacrifices when you stood up. So what does it take to stand?
Well, first of all, you have to have the belief that that's what is going on and that you're right. And then you say, you know, does it take bravery? Does it take courage? I guess. I think oftentimes you react in the moment. Doesn't take anything other than, you know, you react. But I believe it takes courage of conviction and courage of action. It's a thing that you can't just always wait around. You know, you talk's cheap. You can talk stuff all day long. You know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. If we only did this, we woulda, shoulda, coulda done something. That's not even relevant. You know, it's like the guy that was in that one of the planes when those planes crashed into the American. There was a third plane that never hit its target. We think it was headed for the White House. And do you know that story? There were 3 jet planes that were commandeered. 2 of them hit their target. The third plane was in Pennsylvania, and it was also under control of terrorists. So the guys on the plane already somehow had figured out that, you know, terrorists, they were crashing these planes. And so there were some guys on there, and this took courage, bravery, whatever you want to call it. And they decided, they got together somehow and said they were going to overtake the terrorists, whatever it took, knowing the plane would crash. The reason they knew this is some of them had their cell phones and they're talking to their wives and saying, you know, we're on this plane, we know they're going to crash it somewhere. And the wives, I think, were saying, well, there's already been 2 planes crashed. And so one guy, his favorite saying was, I think he said, let's roll. So he kind of was the organizer. And so they've got their cell phones, people, you know, and so this guy, they got all together and he said, let's roll. And they just charged the pilots, whatever, and they overtook the plane. None of them knew how to fly a plane, obviously. And so they crashed it in a field in Pennsylvania. All of them got killed. Well, they did that for the many things we've been talking about. You know, it's the freedom of the country. It's that we're gonna, when it comes time to stand up, who's it gonna be? And that's one of the great stories, you know, in America during that time. And there's others. I mean, there's just tons of them like that. But can you imagine sitting there like, well, you guys, you got families, you got kids, you're in a plane, just think you're going somewhere, and all of a sudden, terrorists take it over. What do? Look, most people just sit there and go with the flow and whatever, get killed in the crash, as opposed to doing something, whatever it is, do something. You know, I've often said, you know, don't just sit around, even do something, even if it's wrong. At least do it.
So basically, like you said, we would have a family, so that means sometimes life require us to bring a sacrifice.
Well, I think all the time, for your kids, let's see, I really wanted to do A, but one of my boys, you know, wanted to do B, and, you know, you have a choice, you know, so you give up something for, you know, your child, because that's the kind of person you are. And so you sacrifice that sort of thing. You do it all the time. You know, little sacrifices, big sacrifices. I know, like, for example, in the military, you know, it's a sacrifice to leave your, well, we didn't have kids, but we were married. I sacrificed a whole year. At that time, we didn't have all the phones and everything. So in 1 year, I talked to Kathy, my wife, for 3 minutes on a radio one day, and it was in the public. There was a group that went around Vietnam, and they worked with the radio operators in the States, and so it was a very open, they'd beam up and say, okay, it'd go to this radio operator, and he'd transfer it to Washington, and then whatever, and they would schedule it ahead of time, and if you were lucky enough, it was called a Mars radio station, military affiliate radio station, and you had to sign up and say, okay, your 3 minutes is from 9 o'clock at night to 9:03. If you got there at 1 minute after, too bad, you have 2 minutes. And they would shut you off at the 3 minute, they just shut off the mic. So that's a sacrifice. And in 1 year, we did have 1 week that we got to spend together, what they called R&R. So, you know, giving up a year of married life, that's a sacrifice. Not being able to even talk to your wife. And a lot of times if you sent letters, they never got where they were supposed to go. You're out in combat or something, and they just never arrived. So that's a type of sacrifice. You have little ones. You have, you know, all kinds. So yeah, you gotta be willing and feel good about it. If you sacrifice and you're bitter for the sacrifice, is that really a sacrifice? You know, then that eats at you. So you got to be able to, you know, whatever it is, let it go. You know, just next, and be thankful you were able to sacrifice in the first place.
I think what you were saying is the thing what society needs to hear today.
Well, yeah, you know, and there's no turning back. You know, it's erosion. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, as we say, and I don't know if you guys say it, but it's said in America. You know, it's just a little thing here. It's just constant destruction with a little bit at a time. Pretty soon you're bleeding to death. You don't even know it. And so, you know, it's and again, it goes back to, don't be too little, too late. You know, it's and just in general, like freedom is too precious to lose. You know, without freedom, you know, is life really worth living? It probably is, but you're not going to have a fulfillment, you know, in life, and that's so important. You know, I don't think we were intended to just muddle along and be the oppressed people because someone has the power to lock you up, and, you know, but again, remember, whatever that is, your mind is free. Nobody can put chains around your mind. And like right now, in a moment's notice, I can travel back to my house in Leavenworth just like that. You can't stop me, you know, in my mind. And so But if you use your mind, you've got it. I think everybody's got an innate intellect to do things. It just comes with who you are, and so use that, and never look back. Don't apologize. That's the other thing. People don't have to apologize if they're trying to do the right thing. If you do the wrong thing, I don't have a problem with apologizing, but you don't have to apologize for doing what you think is right.